everyone, my name is Giovanna Proença and today we're going to talk about project 3 of CS50 AI called Crosswords. So in this exercise we're going to write an AI to generate crossword puzzles. We're going to receive pretty much a text file with all the possible words that we can use for this particular game. Another file that will contain, let me open it up in here, the structure of our puzzle. So if we go here to structure 0, here we have the structure of the puzzles where the hashtags here, they mean where we cannot fill in with letters, and where we have those underscores are the parts where we can add letters. So pretty much we're creating this structure here. All right, we have another file, this words0.txt, with all the possible words we can use to win our game. And we're gonna have also a image file that will contain the output of our game. So here at the end we're gonna print out the words in the puzzle. All right, so this is pretty much what we have for today. In this particular code, we're gonna implement 6 functions, if I'm not mistaken. We're gonna use our AC, the part of the lecture of arc consistency. So it's pretty interesting. This is the only project for this week. So let's get started. All right, they already provide for us the main code. So crosswords.py pretty much contains some classes that we're gonna use to implement our game. So we have the class variable. This variable is pretty much the space that we have to fill in. So this is variable 1, this is variable 2, variable 3, and variable 4. So pretty much this class variable will contain where we can add the words. We have here a crossword class that is generating the logic of creating the visual part, so the width and the height of the game. And I believe this is pretty much like that. We also have some functions that we're going to use to check if we have overlaps, like in here, variable 1 and variable 2, they have an overlap at one letter, and here the same. All right, and we're going to use the things that they already implemented to help us out. So as I mentioned, crosswords.variables is all the variables that we have available. Crosswords.words is the set of words we can use to build our crossword, and we have a function for overlaps to check if we have overlap or not. For the first function, enforce node consistency, we should update the domain. The domain, I already go ahead and started my debugger. Pretty much the domain will contain all the variables. So in our example here, we are working with this structure where we have this space here to fill in, this one, and this last one. So we have 4 spaces to add our words. And the domain will contain all the possible words we can fit in those spaces. All right, right now the domain has all the words available. Our goal for this first function, this enforce node consistency, is to evaluate if the words that we have available, they fit in the space. So which means that here for our first variable, we are expecting a word with 4 letters, so we should reject words that has less letters than that or more. For the other variable here, again, we are expecting a word with length 4. For the variable 5, we're expecting a word with 5 letters, so we should reject words that have less or more than this. And finally, this last variable we're expecting a word with 3 letters, so we should reject the same idea. So our goal is pretty much enforcing that we have this node consistency. We need to check if the variable has exactly the words available for each variable has exactly the length that it can't accept. All right, so how are we going to implement that? Pretty much we're calling the function for node consistency, and when we get inside, we have available all the things that we have available in our crosswords. So we should start doing a loop through all the variables, all the spaces we need to fill in, and we need to extract the words that has more or less letters than the length. All right, so this is where we're gonna start. I'm gonna start doing a loop. So I'm gonna say for var in self.domains, and this will give us the variable we're working with. And we should do a loop in all the words that we have in here. So this is a set. We're gonna do a loop through all the words that we have in this particular variable. Then I'm gonna say for word in our set of self.domains on position var. Okay, so basically we're going here in this variable and we're gonna check one word at a time, and if the length of this word is different than the length of the variable, we're going to remove from the set. So if len of word is different than var.length, so here the var has this property length. Let me see if I can go ahead and show. Probably I can't show it in here exactly, but we're going to take a look in the debugger soon. So length, so if the length of the word is different than the length of the variable, we're going to remove. So we're going to do self dot domains dot on position var, and I'm gonna say remove our word. All right, and at the end they don't tell us to return anything, so I'm gonna remove that, and let's go ahead and use the debugger so you can check that this part is working as expected. So all right, we are in here, we get inside of the function. So the first, we're gonna start our loop. Var here is the first variable, so on position, the start is on position 1, and let's see here, so position 1, and here on the x, so on the x we're starting at 1, and on the y it's 4, so probably we are in here, and it's down, so we're going down. Maybe I'm making a mistake, but we have length 4. All right, length 4, so we're talking about this part, so we're expecting a word with length 4. Now we're going to do a loop through all of the words in this variable. So first we're going to work with the word 6, as we can check in here. 6 has 3 letters, so since it's different, we're going to go ahead and remove. So once I click here one more time, you will see that the word 6 will be removed from this domain. All right, so we're enforcing this node consistency. Then we're going to check the next word, which is 7. 7, it has more than 4 letters, so we're going to remove, as we can see it right now. All right, and the process will go ahead until one point. Let me run the debugger so we pass through all that. We're gonna have all the possible words for each variable, so now it's node consistent. Now we're gonna put words that fit exactly in the portion that we should add letters. Okay, so first function is done. Then we should work with our revise function. So the revise function, we're gonna make variable x arc consistent with variable y. So pretty much we're going to receive 2 variables, for example, this one, and we're going to check if they are consistent. In these terms, what this means, they have an overlap, right? So let's take a look at this image. Let's suppose we're talking about these 2 variables, variable 1 and variable 2. Our goal for this revise function is to check that this letter here for variable 1 and variable 2, they must be the same letter. So I'm going to check in all of the domains of variable 1, and here in the second position, it has to be a letter that the words in the domain of variable 2 has the first letter exactly the same. Like in a puzzle, right? If we take a look in here we have an overlap, so pretty much we need to make sure that those 2, let me use this other example. We need to make sure that this variable here has the same first letter as this variable here. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. So we need to guarantee that the words available on both domains, they must have the same letter in where they overlap. Okay, and to do so, we're going to use the revise function they explain here in the lecture. So we're going to start implementing the revise function, and then we will be able to try it out once we complete implementing the AC3. Let's now focus on the revise function. Pretty much, we're going to start creating a variable saying revise equals to false. We're going to loop through all the words in X domain, so in the first variable domain. Then we're going to do a loop in all of the words in Y domain, and we're going to check if the letters are the same in the portion where they overlap. All right, so this is pretty much what we're gonna do. How can we do that? Let me go ahead and remove this. So we are receiving X and Y. Initially, before we do that, let's start doing what they mentioned. We should create our variable revise equals to false, like they are showing here in the function. So revise equals to false. And I'm gonna check if they overlap. So we have a function here in Crosswords at the bottom that has name overlap, where it is. Let me go here, overlap. Yes, we have a dictionary that will tell if the variable overlaps or not. So I'm gonna say overlap equals to self.crossword.overlaps, and I'm gonna send the 2 variables we wanna take a look. Okay, in order to see what's going on, I'm gonna say here return, we will complete later. I'm gonna put a breakpoint at this point because I want to show you what's going on. And I'm just gonna call the function revise sending 2 variables. Let's see if we can do that. So I'm gonna say, yeah, probably we're not able to do that. So soon we're gonna see, all right? Pretty much, this overlap function will return something, will return to us where we should be. So let me go ahead here and show you. So I changed my mind. I decided to call the function here in AC3. Creating the function here self-revise. I'm sending 2 variables, so variable 01 down 5 and variable 01 across 3. If we take a look at the where this means, we're talking about this 1 down and this 0 here across. All right, so we're talking about those two spaces here. As we know, they have an overlap, all right? So that's why I decided to take those two variables. So I'm gonna get inside of the function revise. Let me go ahead and click enter. Now we are in the function revise. X is one variable, Y is the other one. And we're gonna start creating our revise equals to false. We're gonna call the function overlap, and I wanted you to take a look what overlap will be. Overlap will tell us at which position those two spaces, those two variables, they have this overlap. So here we can see that the first letter of variable 1 and the first letter of variable 2, they have an overlap. So we need to make sure that all the domains between those two variables, they should start with the first letter. So what I mean, we're gonna go here, we're gonna take a look at this variable and this one, and we need to make sure that the domains here, they have the words with the same letter. So we know that 6, here we have a 7, so we're good to go. 2, we have a word 3, so they have this overlap, but the word 1 doesn't have, we don't have any other word here that starts with O, so we should remove 1 from this domain. 10 here, we can have an overlap with 3, we don't know yet. And 8, we cannot have an overlap with any of the available words for the first variable, so we should remove. So pretty much we're checking if with the overlap, we're guaranteeing here that the words available, they allow this overlap. All right, now that we have this information available, we need to make sure that they overlap or not. So we're gonna go here and I'm gonna do this if statement. So if overlap is none, this means that they don't overlap, so we don't need to do any revise function. This part we're doing is just to double check in case we have an overlap. So if they don't have an overlap, whatever, we just move on. If they overlap, now we should start our job. So I'm gonna extract in two variables these positions that for variable X and for variable Y that the words start, okay? And I'm gonna say overlap, and it will break it down. So I will be 0 and J will be 0, representing what position, what letter, in what position this letter, they have an overlap. So we can take a look. Then we're gonna do a loop in our X domain. So for word X, I'm gonna use this name so you can understand, in set of self.domains on position X. So we're gonna take a look at all the words for X, the ones that we want to see, and we're gonna start checking if we have this match or not. So I'm gonna have a variable here that I'm gonna call match found, and I'm gonna start as false. At the very beginning, if we don't have any match, we're gonna extract this word. If we don't have the same letter in that same position for both variables, we're gonna say that the match wasn't found and we're gonna extract. Otherwise, in case we find a match, we won't do anything. So now we're gonna look, we're gonna do a search in the words of the second variable to see if we have a match or not. If we do, we just move on to check the next word. So for word Y in set self.domains Y, if they have, actually I make it so for word I in self.domains Y, now we need to check if both words have the same letter in the same position. So I'm gonna say word X, if word X on position I has the same letter of word Y on position J, so the match was found. So I'm gonna update this to true, and I'm gonna stop the loop because I already found the match. Otherwise, we're gonna keep looping through all the words of word Y, and at the end of the day, if we didn't find any match, so for example, I have here the word one. I'm gonna look and see if we have a letter O in the beginning of the other words in here. Once we don't find it, we can guarantee that this is not an available word for us, so we should remove. So if match found equals to false, we're gonna remove the word from self.domains X, and word X, we want to remove the word from this domain, and we're going to say that revised is equals to true, because we need to say a flag here that we did a revision or not. Like they're telling us here, return true if a revision was made to the domain X, return false if no revision was made. Here we are just interested in changing the domain of the first variable. The second one we don't care for now. In the future with the AC3 function, we're going to check both sides, all right? And then at the end of the day, once we check it all, we're going to return if revise became true or false. So we're going to say this flag. Now let me go ahead and use the debugger all over again so we can double check that this part is correct. Okay, so let me remove it from here. All right, and let me go ahead. And we're going to take a look for the first word, and I want you to see what's going on in here. So revise is false. We're going to check our overlap. This we're going to skip because we have an overlap. I and J will be 0. And now we're going to start our loop in the variable X. So right now we are working with the word 7 here, with this word 7, all right? We're going to start our match found to false, and we're going to do a loop in all of the words of this other variable. Okay, so right now the other word we're checking is the word 1. 1 doesn't have the same first letter as 7, so this if statement is not correct. Then we're gonna take a look at 10. 10 doesn't have the same first letter as 7. So next iteration we're talking about the word 2. Again, they don't have the same first letter. And finally, we're talking about 6. 6 and 7 have the same letter, so we're gonna say that we have a match. We're gonna break, so this word is safe. So we can keep using 7, there's no problem for us. Next iteration, we're working with 3, so we should go ahead and check in the other variable if we have at least any word that starts with T. So 1 and 3, they don't have the same first letter, but 3 and 10 they have, so we found a match. This word is appropriate, so that's okay. Then we're gonna continue our loop. Now we're working with the word 8, okay? 8 here, now we're gonna do a loop. We know that we don't have any word here that starts with E, so we're gonna do this loop. We're never gonna find a perfect match, and when we complete during our loop, our match is still false, so we should remove the word 8 from our domain, and once I hit here, you will see that 8 will disappear. So we don't have 8 anymore, and because we made a change in our self.domains, we should change revise to true, and we're gonna return true back to AC3 function. Alright, so this is pretty much what we should do for this function. Now we're gonna move forward and understand the AC3 function. So right now in the revise function, we just took a look at one pair of variables and we just did things for one variable. We just changed the domain for one variable. Now our goal is to do the same process over and over again until we can guarantee that all the variables there are consistent. And to do so, we're gonna use this pseudocode they provide during the lecture, where we're gonna have a queue with all the possible variables that we have available in our crosswords. Then we're gonna do a loop while this is not empty. So while we have variables to take a look. All right, then we're gonna remove this pair of variables. We're gonna call the revise function. If we change something, if the function revise return true, we should check if the domain is not empty, because if the domain is empty, this means that we cannot solve the crosswords, right? So if we don't have any available word to add in the variable, this means that we cannot solve the puzzle. Or otherwise, if it's not empty, we should check all the neighbors again for this particular variable, and we should do the process over again, because because we remove a word, we should double check if we didn't break any other thing. So we're gonna kind of do this loop over and over again. And by the end, if everything went fine, we can certainly return true to tell, all right, our code is arg consistent, all right? So we're gonna start here checking this. Let me scroll up. We have the AC3, we are receiving args, so update self-domains such that each variable is arg consistent. If args is none, begin with initial list of all args in the problem. Otherwise, use args as the initial list. So this is where we should start. We should start checking if we are receiving the args or not. All right, let me remove these two things here and we're gonna start typing. So if args is none, so if it's empty, we should insert all of the pairs we wanna take a look. So I'm gonna do a loop. I'm gonna create a list and I'm gonna do a loop adding all of the pairs of variables so we can take a look at all the pairs accordingly. So for x in self.crossword.variables, I think this is how it's written, yes. And I'm gonna do a loop to get the pair. So let me go back. For y in self.crosswords.neighbors. So here we can get all the neighbors. We have this function, neighbors, that will give us all the neighbors for that particular variable x, because here we're just interested in checking if they overlap or not and the possible changes we might have. So we're doing this other type of loop. And then we're gonna add these pairs in our args. So now we're gonna append this pair of x and y. So we are preparing this initial space for us to check the possible variables and their pairs. Then we should convert this q. So we're doing this part. Now we should make sure that q is a list. I'm going to create a variable called q, like they provide in the pseudocode, and I'm going to convert this into a list. In case args is not a list when we receive, we are making sure that it is. Then they tell us to do a while q, it's not empty. So since q is a list, so while q it's not a empty list, so while q has a length greater or equals to 0. So while length of q is greater, not equals, just greater than 0. When we do that, they're telling us to create those two variables x and y and remove from the q. So I'm going to create a variable x and y and I'm going to say q.pop. I will always remove the first item of our list. Okay, so this way we are always removing the initial item. And now they're telling us to call the revise function and check if it's true. We only care about this function returning true. So if self.revise, and I'm gonna send x and y is equals to true, so if this function returns true, first we need to check the size of x domain. So if x domain is 0, we should return false. And to do that, we're gonna use the length again of self.domain, and we're gonna use the variable x to check if it's 0. So we're gonna check if this part here is 0, all right, the length. If it is, they're telling us to return false. Okay, so we're gonna return false. If not, all right, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add neighbors of x, except the current variable we just took a look, back to the queue. So we should do all this process again. So we're gonna add new items in our queue again. So kind of this loop will be kind of forever, right? So I'm gonna do for z in self.crossword.neighbors of x. So I'm gonna get all the neighbors of x again. If